It's now 7 months since Hamas, together with ordinary Palestinians, stormed southern Israel and raped, slaughtered, mutilated, and burned alive over 1,200 innocent civilians, including babies, children, women, and the elderly. This operation was successful much because of Israel's generosity towards Palestinians, offering them permits to work in the Jewish land, where they were paid up to 40 times more than they would have earned in Gaza. During their visits, they infiltrated communities, mapped out targets, and identified weaknesses in Israel's defense. The horror they inflicted would be unimaginable, but in an obscene and morbid twist of fate, it needn't be imagined, thanks to the butchers broadcasting their bloodbath with psychotic glee. This essay, however, is not about them. Rather, it's about their defenders, people making excuses for them and offering up justifications the butchers themselves never asked for. It's about phony revolutionaries, LARPing as victims, taken to the streets or camping on the campuses of universities their parents pay up to $90,000 a year for them to attend, while issuing lists of demands to really underscore their facetious ludicrousness. It's about people who know nothing, who have achieved nothing, have contributed to nothing, have offered nothing, and have nothing to offer, yet have the audacity to demand submission to all their pathetic wins. What is at play here? As I asked in a recent essay, what is it about Israel that so animates them that is lacking in Sudan, Nigeria, Afghanistan, or North Korea? It's the evil concoction of ignorance with Jew hatred, fanned by Zionists. Let's explore their claims and measure them against the truth. Take their calls for intifada. Of course, there have been intifadas in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, but also in London, New York, Madrid, and Paris. And each time, it has meant the mutilated, maimed, and mangled bodies of innocent civilians. Do the students at UCLA or Columbia know about this? Do they care? And what about the impact it has had on innocent Muslim lives? Not to make this a play on Norm MacDonald's joke about the worst part of each Islam-inspired jihadi attack being the aftermath for the Muslim community, that whenever Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad, or any of the countless Islamofascist conclaves decide to slaughter innocent civilians of another country, they force the hand of that government to retaliate. And being the cowards that they are, they ensure that non-combatants are there as shields. This fulfills two objectives. One, the manipulation of Western public sentiment, as we are seeing with these useful idiots. And two, the Islamic notion of shaheed or martyrdom. Claim number two, apartheid. Afrikaans in origins describes the racial segregation in South Africa and Namibia from 1948 to 1990. How this even applies in an Israeli setting has never been explained. As I've written before, there are over 2 million Arabs living in Israel. There is not a single Muslim majority country where the general Arab population are as free, prosperous, healthy, democratically represented, or guaranteed parity between sexes and sexual minorities and majorities, as in Israel. They have parties in the Knesset. An Arab judge, Salim Jobran, sent a former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, to prison. Just let that linger for a second. Can you even imagine a hypothetical scenario in Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Iraq, or Syria, where an Israeli person can ever even become a judge, much less a prominent one, to such an extent where they can sentence a former country's leader to prison? In fact, there is no country in the Middle East or of the 55 Muslim majority countries on earth where the accusation of apartheid is less true than in Israel. But how about the people in Gaza and West Bank? Surely they are subjected to apartheid by Israel because of their fences and difficulties in entering the Jewish homeland. Well, Gaza is run by Hamas and West Bank by Palestinian Authority. If people there are victims of any form of apartheid, it's because of their elected leaders imposing it. Israel has no executive power in either region. And more than any country on earth, they are forced to vet who comes into their homeland. Serious countries always used to do this, but just because we in Europe stopped and let anyone who wanted to come in, it doesn't mean that Israeli leaders must subject their nation to the same form of harakiri, especially when their neighboring countries are so committed to the eradication of all Jews. Claim number 3, genocide and ethnic cleansing. Of course, this is the most heinous, evil slur labeled at the world's only Jewish state, and it is so by design. It is meant to be libelous, pernicious, and hurtful, and not in any way a representation of facts. Watching the cretins on college campuses or ignoramuses on social media callously throw these terms around without a second's thought or inkling of erudition on the subject is as informative as it is disheartening. Regardless of how much it is pointed out that Palestinian population has grown with over 550% since the creation of Israel, this countermilious myth refuses to die. Instead, we hear from charlatans like Bassem Youssef that the reason for the growth is not because there isn't a genocide, there is, but because people move there. So, according to Youssef, we have, for the first time in human history, people emigrating to a country where they'll be subjected to genocide. That would be like Jews moving to Germany and Poland in 1939, or Armenians relocating to Turkey in 1915, Kurds emigrating to northern Iraq in 1992, or Bosnian Muslims moving to Srebrenica in 1994. It's impossible to take such statements seriously, whether legally, academically, or morally. In the almost 5-hour debate on Lex Friedman's podcast against Benny Morris and Stephen Bonnell, Mouin Rabbani and the repulsive Norman Finkelstein tried to make the case for genocide. Rabbani's argument rested on two viewpoints. Number one, the outcome of South African legal proceedings against Israel in the ICJ, which he acknowledged will take years before the facts are available for it to have legs, making it the first time in human history where an accusation of genocide has been leveled against a nation preemptively, before any evidence to back it up with. And number two, his personal view that Israel's action in Gaza fulfills the two criteria of genocide: intent and the destruction of a people in whole or part. Yet again, this is such dishonest, propagandistic rhetoric that is impossible to take seriously. I've already explained South Africa's case is the first one in history to be presented preemptively without any evidence. But Rabbani's second point is much more sinister. It claims that Israel has an intent to kill as many civilians as possible in an effort to destroy them as a people. To defend his thesis, he yet again refers to the South African case presented before the ICJ, where he claims that the case for intent is powerfully convincing. Finkelstein, in the typically corrupting and manipulative fashion that has become his trademark, reinforces this argument by pointing to how 15 ICJ judges, including an American, which apparently is scientific proof for him that South Africa are right, agree that there is plausibility of intent. He then rests his entire case on the fact that South Africa's case is 84 pages, written in single space, which just goes to show how strong it apparently is. First of all, the case brought forward by South Africa is flooded with lies, dishonest quote mining, and deliberate misrepresentations. Steve Bonnell pointed out just one of those in the debate, but even those that are accurately included are mainly bellicose statements uttered in fury of the aftermath of the gruesome October 7th attacks. As Raymond Wax, the emeritus professor of law and legal theory at the University of Hong Kong, explains, a moment's thought would explain why, following the barbaric, sadistic onslaught which left at least 1,200 dead, many wounded, and some 250 taken hostage, certain Israeli political and military leaders rashly unleashed clamorous calls to arms, promising vengeance and retaliation for the unspeakable suffering that befell so many innocent citizens and foreign visitors. To treat such injudicious remarks made in the heat of a national tragedy as evidence of a state's intention to commit genocide is both disingenuous and highly tendentious, especially as they included comments made by individuals with no direct role in Israel's military decision-making. But it gets worse for Rabbani and Finkelstein. Mere days after the debate on Friedman's podcast, John Donahue, who served as president of the ICJ from February 2021 to February 2024, was interviewed by the BBC and debunked the now ubiquitous lie that the ICJ has concluded that accusation of genocide is plausible. As she explained, the court decided that the Palestinians had a plausible right to be protected from genocide, and that South Africa had the right to present that claim in the court.
It then looked at the facts as well, but it did not decide, and this is something where I'm correcting what's often said in the media, it didn't decide that the claim of genocide was plausible. It did emphasize in the order that there was a risk of irreparable harm to the Palestinian right to be protected from genocide. But the shorthand that often appears, which is that there's a plausible case of genocide, isn't what the court decided.
Has either Rabbani or Finkelstein come out with a correction or mea culpa? Of course not. If Israel wanted to, they could eradicate Gaza and the West Bank before breakfast. Instead, they have let over 500 aid trucks in on a daily basis. Over 30 million texts and phone calls has been made to civilians, warning them of impending operations to minimize casualties. Name one other genocide where aid trucks have not only been allowed in, but even delivered by the power committing this supposed genocide. Name one occasion of ethnic cleansing where the perpetrators have actively worked to reduce civilian casualties. But above all, name one time when the so-called genocide or ethnic cleansing could end by the surrender of the enemy or returning of hostages. Just one. Last argument, colonization. Finally, the entire framework of these ignoramuses, the colonialists versus the colonized. The left has always viewed every political phenomenon as a power play between the weak and the strong, the powerful and the powerless, the haves versus the have-nots. In the case of Israel versus Palestine, this is manifested as supposed colonizers versus the colonized. As has now been expressed ad nauseum, there is no other case in human history where a people without a nation have been accused of colonization. Nor has a population returning to their historical homeland been told that they are parasites leeching on the lands of others. These ignorant, iniquitous imbeciles never ask how Islam spread from what is today Saudi Arabia to conquer half the world. They have no clue why over 360,000 Jews relocated to Israel in 1948 from Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia, or over 130,000 from Iraq. They have no clue why 200,000 Jews from Ethiopia and Iran respectively had to move to Israel. In their illiterate minds, the Jews living in Israel come from Brooklyn or Poland, not knowing that the vast majorities of Israelis are themselves or their descendants from Middle Eastern Jews who were expelled from Arab countries where they had lived as second-class citizens, speaking of apartheid. Conclusion. These privileged, spoiled, ignorant morons demonstrating on college campuses, social media, and streets know nothing about Israel and Palestine. They have no morality, they have no education, they have no arguments, they don't even care about innocent lives. What they care about is the narcissistic self-image as benighted radicals. It's all a game for them. They've never read a book on the subject, never listened to a historian, never even questioned what their own words mean. It's just a day out for them, where they can take selfies to post on Instagram and Twitter for likes and shares. They're not activists, they are opportunists, exploiting causes for personal gain. They're just stupid children, especially the adults. It's time to treat them as such.